When I took on the Catachan jungle fighters, I discovered that my station forged tanks were a little on the rotund side, making them a much easier target, and this was really aggravating.
Oh, easy, Mueller. Settle down, George.
Now, George, be reasonable.
Relax. I am relaxed.
No!
So I found a really nice model by Decals and printed a couple of tanks, but now need a tank commander to fearlessly lead them into the thick of combat. There are two exhaust variants, one with them paired on one side and the other with them on each side near the tracks. The latter I saved specifically for the tank commander, and have the two regular tanks with the vents located on one side. Okay, the commander, riding high in the cupola, but who to use? The Station Forge model has one option, but let's see what else we can do. I remember the heavy weapons team model and the spotter, the guy holding the binoculars and pointing to a target. But why indicate with a finger when you can indicate with a plasma blast? Now that's leadership. So, back into Station Forge, and I'm going to use this arm with the plasma pistol to augment the tank commander along with the original two hands on the binoculars, just in case it doesn't work out, giving me a fallback. Lychee! In goes the tank hull, tilted a little so it's more likely to successfully print, and then use the hollowing function. I'm going with 2.5mm, which has been working well so far. And then auto-generate some light supports, and afterwards add a few heavy supports here and there to back up the print and decrease the odds of a failure. And then export with a bottom layer count of 10 and bottom exposure time is 45. The print came out grand, but again, there's the problem that it doesn't fit in my pickle strainers. So breaking out the Ziploc container from before, add the alcohol and swirl it around to strip off the goo. Then off into some warm water to loosen up the last few supports so I can pop them off and not risk damaging the details and more fragile bits. Now, I want to spruce this fella up a bit, make him stand out. Wire cutters and snip off the Sponston smoke launchers and smooth out with the X-Acto, and then replace the 3-barrel version with an 8-barrel version. An additional storage container on the back between the exhaust vents and a comms box with antenna on the side of the turret. Drop the commander into the open hatch cupola, give him binoculars in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other. Looking good. I really like this cobbled together variant. With the model ready, drop them into a cardboard box, head outside and give them a blast of Chaos Black primer. Once dry, flip them over and get the underside. On to painting. A comprehensive layer of Abaddon Black dabbed over everything and worked into all those nooks and crannies. Then, Iron Hand Steel base, dip a big dry brush in and then dance it across the entire structure, catching the edges and raised items for a nice gritty, grimy, industrial look. No time for a fancy paint job or diligently applied camouflage. Fire up the tank and into combat we go with all guns blazing. Identification. I'm going a little more subtle than previously, which actually works well with the design of this print, because as I mentioned there are very few actual areas of smooth due to all the awesome intricate details. So, corn red, paint a pattern on the turret and colour in the Aquila on the rear, and also on the back of both sponsons where there is a smooth, featureless plate. This will help highlight the black emblem transfers I'll be adding. A light wash of Carroburg Crimson shade darkens the paint around the edges and in some of the lumps, giving it a more weathered and beaten look, aged by countless forays into unbridled warfare. The Tank Commander, Thunderhawk Blue, a quick dry brush across the uniform to highlight the folds and hems, then a lighter dry brush of Dawnstone to add a discreet accent to the cloth. The Plasma Pistol, a dry brush of Iron Hand Steel, and then White Scar to the coils, and then once dry, a wash of Tesseract Glow that settles in the troughs to create a deeper hue, leaving the ridges lighter and more incandescent in appearance. Now, I have been basing my Krieg with sand from Red Rocks, Nevada, and Cadian flesh tone oddly matches it perfectly, and so this gets dry brushed heavily onto the underside, and then as the paint is shed, add some swipes in other adjacent areas to represent sand buildup and clinging dust to the armoured beast as it thunders across a blasted desert hellscape. Transfers. From my regimental guide, the Lemun Russ tanks have the bull emblem, so I'll need that, and a Roman numeral with a yellow stroke to help emphasise it. Now, As mentioned in the Lemun Russ video, the Fat Electrician video on Lafayette Puel, aka War Daddy, was highly inspirational, and War Daddy Sherman was called In the Mood, and so I take inspiration from that. Launish, Krieg for Moody. I printed them on transfer paper, cut off the top strip where the prints are lined up so I can just print into the next area and not have to waste a whole sheet for just a few transfers. Grab the transfers with some tweezers and give them a blast of varnish to lock in the ink. Let that dry, paint some micro set to the destination, dip the transfer in water and let it soak for a moment. Then place next to the spot and with an X-Acto steer it off and move it into position before giving it another application of microset and pushing out the air bubbles with a brush. One sponson gets a numeral, the other sponson gets the bull emblem, and the turret gets the name of the tank. And then back to the box for a blast of varnish to lock everything in. Let it dry, flip it over and do the same. So, here we have my new tank commander next to my old one. Much more functional, not as grand in scale, but more able to hurtle down narrow streets and lurk behind shattered rooms. Tank commanders are officers of the Astra Militarum who lead from atop a Lemun Russ battle tank, directing armoured companies and regiments of Imperial Guard. Masters of mechanized warfare, they are intimately familiar with their machines and the crews who operate them. Only those officers with the most singular dedication to the art of tank warfare rise to such a rank. They are an unquestioned authority over their vehicle, crew, and the squadrons they lead. A tank commander coordinates whole phalanxes with a word, guides the loading and firing of weapons with a gesture, and inspires the most fanatic loyalty just through their presence as they ride high in the cupola. The tanks of the Imperium are swift and present devastating firepower. Errors in judgment or flaws in targeting will have the most appalling consequences, and so a tank commander must be ready to implement their plans instantaneously and modify them just as swiftly the moment the combat situation fluctuates. They can never afford to be surprised. They can never show a flicker of hesitation, let alone display a hint of doubt. Tank commanders are the inflexible iron backbone of the Steel Legions, and each is a tactical genius, forged in the raging flames of dozens of battles. This experience augments their skills to make them truly formidable foes. Tank commanders are the stalwart face of each tank company, directing multiple squadrons. They know every bolt, every weld in every vehicle under their purview, and more, because not only do they have an encyclopedic knowledge of the mechanics of these war machines, but just as they know every nuance, every strength, every weakness of each individual crewman, so too are they just as familiar with the traits and idiosyncrasies of the machine's spirits. Tank commanders know which crewman can be relied upon in any scenario, who needs to be propped up and steeled in certain situation, who needs an unflinching barked order at the right moment to unleash their killer instinct, or a calming litany to bolster faltering courage. And they also know the temperamental machine spirits in which they are trusted. The reckless, the headstrong, the erratic. The machine spirits have just as much of individual personality under their command as any gunner, loader, or spotter. Tank commanders sometimes adorn the armoured hulls of their vehicles with the emblems earned in battle, the skulls of fallen enemy commanders, Orc, Traitor, Elder, Tyrannid, Necron, Tau, whoever they have faced on the field of battle and crushed. Others seek to bring the light of the Emperor down upon them and those they lead, placing reliquies and scripture upon their tanks, or by blasting pious sermons and rousing battle hymns from vox speakers. Style is myriad, but end is singular. So however a tank commander chooses to lead, to style their forces, to display their victories, they are all, without exception, lords of mechanized combat and are formidable and unrelenting warriors, ready to fight and die in the service of the Imperium and the Emperor of mankind.